This guide is not carved in stone. You can adjust, adapt and change anything any way you want. Just remember the core features I'm about to tell you.
Peggy 18.
Mjolnir, since its introduction back in the POE1 days, became my obsession. The mighty weapon of Thor, which allowed for ultimate power and ultimate tankiness in one single build. The one and only item you'll ever need. And since then, my one and only goal in POE was to design new and fun builds around it. Sadly, much has changed along the years through several heavy nerfs to a point where any Mjolnir build was no more playable. However, since patch 0.2.1 in POE2, Mjolnir might have its glory days back again and shine upon us once more. Maybe not in the full colors of rainbow, but should be cool enough nonetheless. So grab a cup of coffee, sit down and let me tell you about this specific Mjolnir variant that I was working on hard for a couple of weeks. This Mjolnir build that I am presenting you now is focused more on the spell trigger rate, aka proc rate, rather than on melee attack damage. At the same time, as with all of my other builds, my goal here was to achieve a good blend of damage and defense. Thor never was a squishy guy, especially in its Big Lebowski form. With this build you should be able to face roll most of the T15 and Pinnacle content. There will be some bumps along the leveling road, but in the end expect rather smooth T15 experience and about 1 million Pinnacle DPS, at a budget below 12 divines. Now let's talk about the offense and what makes this build able to glide through the maps. As with any trigger build, proc rate is everything, and the key to unlock Mjolnir's full potential lies within the following building blocks: hit chance, APS, energy gain. We will be using Resolute Technique Keystone to ensure that our hit chance is always 100% no matter what. We will not care if monsters are evasive, if our target has high evasion, and we will have one less stat to worry about: accuracy. Especially in the context of having rather low dexterity. Our attacks per second will be scaled through attack speed, skill speed and support gems. Mjolnir on its own has decent local attack speed, so we don't need to invest heavily into this area. The more attacks per second we do, the more hits we do. More energy we will gain, the more spells we will trigger, the more DPS we will have. With 100 chance to hit, we can treat APS basically as a more multiplier to our damage. Energy gain is a tricky one. Let me briefly explain. Skip this section if you know how it works. Every meta skill has an energy container. It's like a fuel tank that once filled up will trigger and then resets its fuel level to 0. This has several implications. Firstly, any excessive energy after reaching the limit is lost. There are some passive skills and support gems that can restore some of the energy lost in the same step, but more on that later. Second, any meta skill has its own fuel container, and those will gain energy at the same time from a single event. Energy gaining events varies for a different meta skill. For Mjolnir and its Thunder God's Wrath, that event is a melee hit. Having two Mjolners equipped, you have two Thunder God's Wrath containers, each gathering energy from a single hit at the same time. Now, the amount of energy gained varies depending on the power level of a monster you are hitting. Without getting too deep into this topic, consider this. You will gain the same amount of energy with 20 regular monster hits and with one unique boss hit. However, Mjolnir has some hidden aces under its sleeve. First, it gains 3 energy per event instead of 1, like all other meta skills. Second, this line here, modified by a percentage of enemy element threshold that hit will deal. To be honest, no one knows how this exactly works and what are the numbers behind it. But the conclusion is this: the harder you hit, the more energy you will gain.
Observe.
This is a level 88 character doing single hits versus level 28 monsters in the campaign. Ball Lightning requires 100 energy to trigger. A very single mace swing is a trigger. This means 100 or more energy is gained per mace attack swing. Those monsters should grant about 6 energy per hit or 12 energy per swing while dual wielding. All energy gained modifiers included. This is not what is happening, and this is because damage of this level 88 character is way more than the life pool of any of those mobs. This tells us that percentage of ailment threshold can exceed way beyond 100%. In this scenario, it is close to 1000% in my opinion, granting 10 times the base energy per hit. While mapping, especially T12 and above, regular monsters will have much more life and our melee damage scaling is somewhat limited. This is why our melee skill of choice, to no surprise, will be Earthquake, and we will make it fast and responsive with huge AoE, to ensure we will hit as many single targets at once and gather as much energy as we can. Having Resolute Technique Keystone on our side, we will ensure those hits will count, ignoring any downsides of using Rich Support Gem at the same time. Also, we'll be using Overwhelming Presence Spirit skill to improve our damage to enemy's ailment threshold ratio even further. Our goal here is to ensure we will trigger all the spells with each single hit versus unique monsters as well as rare monsters, small blue packs, and rather frequently versus regular packs. Now, why dual wield Mjolners? First of all, because it will grant us 2 energy containers so we can use more spells at the same total energy cost. And then simply because, while dual wield, it will hit with both weapons at once per single Earthquake slam, thus doubling our energy generation. A sum of +2 lightning skills is a cherry on the top. The spells we will be using to trigger are 1 Ball Lightning with Scattershot support within top container, then 2 Lightning Orbs with support gems in other container. Both containers will trigger after reaching 100 energy with melee hits at the same time, granting us up to 3 spell triggers per hit if we manage our energy part right. This way we will ensure that when the Lightning Warp is called to trigger, there are Ball Lightning available as well. Otherwise, Lightning Warp is lost, as it can be used only on cooled enemies or Ball Lightnings. With 2 attacks per second, expect 6 hits per second and a proc rate that can be as high as 18 spell triggers per second. Assuming, of course, each hit will gain enough energy to do so.
Of course.
More realistic in-game number is about 9 procs a second though. Having proc rate part done, let's dive into the proper damage scaling. Because this build is really passive points hungry, currently the only proper way to scale both spell damage and melee damage is to go with low life tech. Trust me, this is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
We will be using the Deepest Tower unique helmet, which will treat our enemies as being on low life within our presence all the time. This will unlock usage of the low life damage cluster for a healthy 450% increased damage that will apply both to our melee damage and spells. This also opens a possibility to utilize Execute Support Gem to its full 50% more potential. Default presence radius is rather low, so we will be increasing it with passive skill points and socketables. We need to ensure our present radius is no less than our earthquake impact and aftershock radius. Next, we will be scaling mana, taking full advantage of yet another of Mjolnir aces. Triggered spells cost no mana, and grabbing Spirit Gem Archmage. Archmage will basically act as another solid 50% more multiplier to our damage, assuming maximum mana value around 1600. You can scale this further if you go full mom with Eldritch Battery. More info on the matter later on. Larger mana will also help to maintain higher uptime of Mana Tempest, which does exactly the same thing as Archmage, only does it 2 times stronger, but for a short period of time. Use it as a temp DPS boost versus pinnacle bosses. For regular mapping and bossing it is not needed. Next we'll be scaling our damage further with additional gem levels. We can have up to +8 to our lightning skill gems from our Mjolners, followed by a +3 to spell amulet for a total of +11 to all lightning spells, rendering our lightning orbs our main source of damage at level 31. There is an option to go even further with this, however it is way outside of the budget of this build. Priest of Belief. At the very end we will be converting our lightning damage to cold via Call of the Brotherhood unique ring. This has many advantages, especially in the defensive aspect of the build. And before someone says,
"Hey, but Rico, damage conversions work differently than in POE1.
Well, this is exactly what we want. This way we can use not only cold penetration nodes but also 2 very powerful notables for a strong DPS boost. And this time ignoring elemental resistances for frozen enemies will also benefit our Archmage and Mana Tempest. Having offensive part done, let's talk about defensive layers. First, having higher mana pool will also provide constant global damage reduction to our life pool via Might of the Matter. There are several ways to execute this tech in a build, more on that later on. For now, I will suggest, based on my gameplay testing, to use partial mom. 20% of damage goes to mana is good enough. This will provide a decent damage reduction for every damage type, physical, elemental, chaos, dots, except bleed, while providing enough mana left to use skills and act on. Combining armor and energy shield gear will provide additional ES on top of life. All in all, expect about 5k plus EHP. Elemental resistances can and should be capped and raised to a maximum of 76%. You can have +1% to all maximum resistances enchant on your chest, for example. Chaos resistance should be sitting around 50%. The deepest tower provides up to 20% on its own, so it shouldn't be that hard. Armor should be at 6k or more. This is not to prevent high physical damage spikes, but rather many small hits that you will be exposed to while warping from pack to pack, especially while doing so in a breach or delirium. I will highly recommend to use unique body armor called Wave Shaper, which has all we need and more. Just aim for one that has close to 50% of gain X% of maximum mana as armor, as this will scale armor nicely with already high mana pool and fit this build perfectly. Having high EHP pool with decent damage reduction on all fronts is sadly still not enough in this game. To feel somewhat tanky, life, mana and ES needs a good recovery. We'll be using Leech from physical damage for both life and mana, life regen via passive nodes and via consecrated ground, mana regen from clarity and passives, as well as life and mana recovery on both. As far as energy shield goes, we'll be using only its own recharge mechanic. Luckily for us, the chest of choice, Wave Shaper, grants our mana regen percent to also apply to our ES recharge rate. so Clarity Spirit support gem will provide additional 30% for both. Passive skill tree is rather simple and straightforward. However, this build is very skill points hungry, as we need to satisfy many different things, including damage for attacks and spells, AoE for attacks and spells, attack speed, huge stat requirements, javel sockets, and so on. I would not recommend switching to Mjolnir until level 80 or so. Now, instead of talking about every single passive point, let me just point out the important stuff. Resolute technique, we absolutely need that. Without it, with low dex and thus low accuracy, proc rate just sucks, not only versus bosses, but especially versus packs, as we want to use Earthquake, supported with rich support gem. Low life damage clusters, another no-brainer, scales both attack and spell damage due to a use of the Deepest Tower unique helmet. Presence area increases. Default presence radius is low, we need to ensure it covers almost the same area as Earthquake itself. Otherwise, once again, proc rate versus packs will suck. Here we take some additional attack speed and mobility while mapping. Some additional AoE that works for both attacks and spells. Armour and ES hybrid nodes to increase both at the same time. We don't have the luxury of wasting points here. Cold penetration cluster. We will ignore elemental resistance versus frozen mobs. However, we need to freeze it first. Trigger cluster. For increased energy generation and a solid 114 damage increase for spells. 20% of Mon with plus 15 to intelligence. Too good to pass on. Duration reduction nodes to reduce time we have to wait before Earthquake's aftershock appears. From default 4 seconds down to 800 milliseconds. As far as Ascendancy goes, we grab hulking form ASAP and then 15% more life. This is all we need. After that, it's a matter of preference. Now let's talk about optimal gem links. For our attack of choice, Earthquake, we will use Martial Tempo to achieve at least 2 attacks per second or 0.5 second of attack time. Rich and Magnified effect for more screen coverage. And Fast Forward with Swift allocation to reduce our 800 millisecond aftershock wait time down to 400 millisecond or 0.4 of a second of attack time. This combination will ensure that with every slam we'll have aftershock hitting 3 times per APS everything on the screen. For our first energy container we'll be using Ball Lightning with Scattershot to ensure we'll always have at least 3 Ball Lightning flying, to satisfy our at least 2 Lightning Warps, followed by Wild Shard for even more Ball Lightning flying, because 1. we will be warping more freely and 2. it looks cool. We will throw Impetus at the end to generate even more energy versus small monsters. For our second energy container we will be using 2 Lightning Warps, as those combined will require exactly the same total energy as single Ball Lightning does. Then execute for 50% more damage, and I will suggest either Flak or Energy Retention to match Impetus in the first energy container. I use Fluke because it always guarantees to gain some energy back and it's rolled twice, once per each warp. Lip Slam setup contains Holy Descent to create consecrated ground upon landing, granting us more life regeneration, followed by Momentum for added damage, Cold Infusion for additional cold damage to chill enemies on landing as well, and then Unabating, which will increase our armor while we are jumping. Archmage setup will contain, well, Archmage, as this works with triggered spells and has basically no downsides, with Mjolnir having no mana cost for triggered spells. We'll complete it with Clarity for additional mana and ES regeneration. Lastly, Overwhelming Presence for more proc rate or Time of Need depending on the map modes. Basically, I will use Time of Need on Elemental Weakness, Temporal Chains, Shock Ground and so on maps to frequently remove those negative effects. With 80% reduction to skill effect duration, Time of Need will be triggered automatically, basically every 2 seconds. For a very other map mods, I would use Overwhelming Presence for a better proc rate, especially if monster density is low. Note here, Overwhelming Presence area of effect will be exactly the same as your low life presence area from the deepest tower, as both of those are presence and scaled as such. So it is easy to see which monsters are affected by our low life damage scaling. Here is my full gear as an example. When choosing your amulet anoint, keep an eye on Sand in the Ace or Acceleration for additional APS increase. And so this is all. Thank you very much for watching and happy drops.